very coherent users of Zoom, that you spend a lot of time on Zoom. Great, fantastic. So we don't really need to do Zoom hygiene, just abide by all the normal cleanliness rules to keep everyone having a really great time. And just, yes, Samantha, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just a lot of times in the consensus world, a lot of people will go with their cameras off. And I'm just wondering if you want us to have camera on the entire time. And if we do need to go camera off, how do you want us to notify if it's cool or not?
Yeah, I mean, in our world, in the world of like us forming a cohesive group, it's really important to us that camera is on unless it's really essential that it's off. And if that does happen, just just a notice it's going to be off for X time, and sorry, I'm doing this. That's fine. We will flow with it and just stating our need as well.
And just pop that in the chat, yeah.
Great, thanks for that question and clarification. Any other comments or noticings on that before? Oh, we've got another person joining. Great.
I just wanted to say something about that. What comes up for me for that is I've noticed that at consensus, but that's everyone has a choice. But I guess it really takes away your own power if you have your camera off, because you can't really fully sort of express your feelings. You kind of cutting off half your communication or even more. It's like, so if you really want to communicate your message, you got to have your camera on, I reckon, and play full out basically.
Cool. Thank you, Thomas. And yeah, totally hear you that you're at the dentist, Travis, and you really want to be here with us. So yeah, thanks for that notice. Okay, well, we don't seem to know where the last, here's Tanya, welcome, fantastic. Okay, so we will begin because we're already 7 minutes in. And Camilla can just join when she arrives. Okay, so just another warm up. This is just for you, Tanya, this is the pilot kickoff of Self-Organization 101 at Consensus, and we're super grateful and happy to have you all with us as we start this training. We really are looking for your co-creation on this. We've run a training called Practical Self-Management many times with people from all over the world, but this one feels really special for us because it's a chance to work with an organization who has already set off down this path and to just be with you as it kind of spreads out into the organization. So we're really inviting input and co-creation, and we're going to just be constantly reaching out to find a better way to do things so that it works for you and it works for your colleagues and your teammates who hopefully will be going through this process as well. And just a little note on that, that's very much our practice of doing consulting, if we can even call it that, which is to start where you're at. And I don't believe, and I think Susan shares this belief, that there's any one best fit practice that you can just bring off the shelf and give to an organization. The beauty of working in a truly self-organizing way is that we invent the agreements, the boundaries, the processes that work for us. And so we're really inviting you to do that with us, and we're super excited about that. And hello, Camilla. We're just getting going. So what we're going to do today is just start with a nice broad overview and introduction so that we get a bit of information on what's going to happen. On that, I just want to introduce some of my co-hosts here with us today, Susan Basterfield, who many of you will know, and Lisa Gill, who is also working with us on this project. Lisa, actually, can I just ask you to say a very quick intro about who you are and why you're here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really honoured to be part of this pilot group and starting to work with some of you all. I'm Lisa. I'm from the UK, based in Barcelona, and my passion and my nerdery is all around helping companies be self-organizing and self-managing. I have a podcast called Leadomorphosis where I geek out with thought leaders and practitioners on that subject, and I'm currently writing a book about it. So that's really kind of my passion, and something that I'm always keen to learn more about. So if anyone ever wants to nerd out with me, then I'm always keen to swap books and resources and stuff like that. So it's great to see you all virtually and look forward to the rest of this pilot course. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And Susan, what should we know about you?
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, much like I think both of you, just totally geek out on this stuff and have been spending sort of the last 3 or 4 years of my life kind of traveling the globe and talking to anybody that's interested about this way of working and creating, I guess, the conditions and confidence for leaders and organizations to start doing their own experiments and practicing in the way that's specifically unique to their particular organization. Like you, very stoked to be able to have iterated this program that we've been running for the last 2 years within one organization whose kind of core tenet is self-organizing. And just as always, just feels so great to see these beautiful faces and really looking forward to what's going to emerge. That's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susan. Okay, so I'm going to give you a very quick kind of sense and overview of what we'll be doing over the next 5 weeks. But an important part of this is that we'll be really working in quite a flowy way. So it's something like really comes up that we think we want to address, we have no problems with throwing out some of the content and shifting there. But there's a high level design process that we're going to walk you through. And this relates really to the work that we are doing with the OD team. And I'll just ask Susan just to comment on that and how we relate to that team and work with that team in a minute. So this training is kind of the first part of the work we're doing in consensus with OD. And it's very much around this notion that self-organization happens at 3 levels in our experience. And a very essential component is the work on the self. We can have all the processes and agreements and systems in the world, but individuals populate those processes and systems, and there is some essential work that we all need to do in order to walk into this world of self-organization. So we will be spending a bit of time today unpicking some of our opinions about what self-organization is. And then, but this week is really centered in this question of who am I and how do I show up in a group. Week 2, we're going to go into the cooperation aspect. So self-organization is about the self, and it's also about working really well with other people. How do I cooperate with others, and how do we make and keep commitments? And there'll be a lot of content in there, but that's the kind of main theme. Week 3, how do we take communication to the next level and create adult-to-adult partnerships and culture? Week 4, how do we start to make effective, conscious decisions together? Week 5, what have I learned and how can I put this into action? That's a real action-based prototyping week that draws everything together. I won't do any questions or comments on that flow now. I just wanted to see that there just as a bit of a general guideline. But what we really do need to do is just talk about some of the logistical things that are going to be super important for us to commit to and to have some awareness of, and we'll allow for questions on that. So Susan.
Thanks. So Zoom, as you know, is our kind of principal mechanism for having asynchronous conversations. I will trust that everybody knows how to operate gallery view and, as Kate was saying before, proper Zoom hygiene. Sometimes I think that I'd love to experiment with what would happen if we all had our mics open, but maybe this group is a little bit too big for that. There's also the Slack channel, so you've all been invited to priv-so101 dash pilot. And so that will be the main place for us to be having our asynchronous conversations in between our meeting times, and for you to be sharing planning logistics with your teammates and whatever else you need to do. Obviously, you can feel free to create your own Slack channels for your teams that week if that's more helpful for you. We also have a Google Drive where all of the assignments, recordings, and resources will be held. And our expectation also is that you publish your projects for the week onto the Google Drive. So make sure that you've got the links to that as well. I think that that's all on logistics. Just, I guess, for Camilla and Tanya's for Camilla and Tanya, please try to keep your camera open when we're on these calls, because it's important for us to be able to see your face. And as Thomas indicated, it's half of your power, at least, sits within us being able to relate to each other that way. I think that's all, Kate. Anything I've missed?
No, that's fine. I'm going to take over from there and talk about the assignments and the expectation around publishing. So typically when we run this training, we ask everyone to write a blog every week. We think that perhaps we're going to try something new with this group, which is to always publish your assignments, but to create one piece of content that you're really happy with that describes something about this journey. So one piece of content, and it might be a podcast, a blog, a creative art piece that covers the whole 5-week journey, and we'll do that. We'll publish that in the last week, and we just kind of want to figure out with you how that works, how that fits in with your really busy schedules. But a really, really important part of doing this work, and I want to stop saying this work, let's define that soon, but is to open source and share. This is a movement that's happening all around the world, and it's all about like publishing your experiments and learning from others. And as we'll talk about our community in Spiral, which is a network of self-organizing, self-managing practitioners of 150 people, and we basically copy and share and steal everything we know. Like we don't, it's so important. So we're asking you to come on that journey with us and start to publish and share what you're learning and the experiments you're running. So that will be the kind of the need and the expectation for what you decide to publish. And we won't spend much time on that today. Let's go into it further next week. But any questions so far on anything Susan and I have said?
I'd just like to comment that that's very much like a design thinking process around like analyzing, empathizing, and designing in an iterative way. So I'm excited for that. Thanks. Fantastic.
Thank you. So most weeks, including today, we will have a guest joining us from our amazing, generous network of self-management kind of leaders and practitioners from around the world. So this time we'll use to just get another lens, another perspective on self-organization. And I'll ask quite a few questions, and we'll try to make space for you to ask questions as well. So this week we'll have Joshua Weil, next week Doug Kirkpatrick from Morningstar, the following week a very special woman called Ria Beck. And there'll be 1 week probably that we don't have a guest, and this is just gives a whole new level to the course. So that's the Monday. We'll be in flow, we'll be doing lots of little jam sessions, exercises together, having discussions. We'll have a guest. And then, of course, you will be put into small teams in order to complete a group assignment. And these teams will change every week. So basically, you'll be working with the majority of people in this Zoom room, which is exciting. And we do ask that you self-organize to make a time where you can figure out how to do the assignment, which is a very crucial part of this training. That's where the fun and the magic happens, is when people self-organize to create brilliance. So that's important. And I think that's all for logistics for now. We can retouch on that later in the call. But I really want to move us into a really amazing crucial practice, which I'm my nickname is the Chicken Queen, because I'm from New Zealand. I realize I didn't do much of an intro. When I say check-in, everyone hears chicken. So the chicken is a super key process for us, people that I've worked with in all of the self-organizing businesses and communities. I'll ask you, Susan, to comment on what the CEO of, what's the store again?
Yeah, so whatever you might think about IKEA, the CEO of IKEA passed earlier this year, but in some of the kind of tributes and reflections on him and his work and his leadership style, he reflected that the single most important leadership technique that he used is the process of the check-in. So I guess if it's good enough for IKEA, we should learn something from that.
Great, yeah. So I'm sure many of you will have practiced a check-in before, but it's a really good way to enable everyone in a room to at least have their voice heard. You can actually often kind of gather and coalesce around the main issues that are going on for people, and this, how we are, often affects how we show up, how we are not just around the piece of work we're delivering or something related to a client, but also what's going on in our kind of whole being. So with check-in questions, I often experiment. Like sometimes you don't want to throw a whole group of people into it with something really deep and ask them to show up in that way. And there's lots of little hack questions that you can do, and we'll be experimenting and playing with them throughout this course. But yeah, so the check-in question for this, for all of you to answer, and you can always say no. If you don't want to, it's fine, but we'll see. So the check-in question is, how are you showing up today, and what is your intention for this training? And I think we'll just do what we call popcorn style, which is, it's kind of a bit more, sometimes takes a bit more time, but it's just like when you're ready, you pop, and I'll call you in. So does someone want to be the first popcorn kernel to pop and check in with, can you drop that question in the Zoom chats, please, Susan? Samantha, was that you?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah. Pop the question back in the chat again. So the intention, right?
Yeah, so how are you showing up today? And that's pretty broad. So you can answer it as you like. And what is your intention for this training, Samantha?
So I'm showing up today insatiably curious, and my intention for this training is to gain a skill set that we can then spread like a virus throughout the mesh. So,
great.
Right, so popcorn it back to Camilla.
So popcorn is when, that's fine. And this is another, that's kind of like the passing the torch flow. But for this particular one, we're just going to wait for the people to feel ready to speak. So who's going to pop next? Great, Camilla's popping.
I'm showing up prepared mentally for this. And what I want to walk away from the trainings is with like actionable items that I can take on to develop my team's purpose, what we value, and like agreements, like developing more of a framework or a handbook, if you will.
Great, thank you. Who's next?
I can go.
Cool.
I'm showing up trying to ground myself because I've come off of the first kickoff day of a retreat for our circle. And so that was high energy and a different context. I'm also showing up self-conscious that I have not done much of the homework as a result, because that was a prime calling of my energy this week. And I'm showing up as a learner. I've been in the space of exploring self-management, self-organization. But I'd argue I've never had formal training or formal learning, and so I really am going to try and come in as the Padawan here today. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm showing up today a little frustrated with my current Wi-Fi situation, so I apologize if I break up every now and again. But I've called into my phone, so hopefully that'll be fine. In terms of my intention, my hope through these 5 weeks is to figure out what's real and what's not, and I mean that in the most open way. So Pegasus, where I'm one of the leads on and a member of, went through a whole governance process a few months back. It took a long time. We got a lot of advice and support, and it was great, but also frustrating because sometimes the advice and support was at its core contradictory or incompatible in some way with our organization. And I feel that I hear exciting but also contradictory words thrown around the mesh quite often. And so trying to get some clarity on what's possible, what's achievable, what's desirable is what I'm hoping for.
Thank you. Who's popping next?
I can pop.
Oh, that kind of made me pop a little bit.
Oh, you can pop first.
Who wants to go first? No, you go. You go.
No, you.
Well, I mean, my intention really is, I find like I'm like changing. I'm not sure what the social norms are when I'm working, and it leaves me in a slightly stressed state always. And I'm not sure when I, talking to people, if they have time to, get clear about conversations, or we just quickly try and get things done. So it leaves me in this constant rush all the time. So my intentions, when I heard about this program was, how can I sort of powerfully master or execute on projects where everyone feels like they're part of a team. I've been in situations where, I've had to manage a lot of people, and that's just so exhausting. And, I've always known that there's a path forward, but I just don't know what that path forward is. And, how do I make that real? And I knew it was connected to people's purpose and then letting them self-organize. But so I'm just just unbelievably excited that there's something that's makes this normal, or makes it feel real. And then I knew that, a glimpse of it for me was that it's about language. And so when I came across that Future of Work forum that Susan did, I was just like, oh, wow, it is about language. So I know that I've got glimpses of what's going to happen, but I don't know how it all pieces together. And I know that it also is a co-creation thing as well. So that's all the things that are popping up for me. So I'm just on the edge of my chair, super excited, really, and glad to share. Oh, and the other thing is, I have for years, always thought about writing a personal blog, and now here I got a team who are all going to be writing a blog together, our own individual blog. So this is great to go through that process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Great. Let's keep moving down to Saraswati. Go ahead.
Down. That's funny. That's my position. Yeah, that's cool. So Thomas spoke a lot. I really resonated with what you said just then. Also nice to see you again. I'm definitely coming in also insatiably curious. Sam penned that well. And I have been doing the reading. It's so cool to see this emergent framing for something that I've been practicing with my own team, and seeing all these different levels show up and beginning to process. It's really challenged. It's like a tyranny of structurelessness thing is happening in certain places, and then simultaneously trying to create structure in with my own teams and us butting up against walls. Just seeing an infrastructure surfacing is just super, super titillating. I'm just also on the edge of my seat, and very eager to, in terms of intentions, to grow personally and improve in my own leadership and practice, and bring some of these learnings to my team and really, really have us grow together. Because it's a perfect moment. I mean, never isn't, I guess, but I'm feeling good, and I'm feeling, the intention to grow into this. Also excited about the blogging. That'll be interesting. Oh, and I'm going to go off camera for 2 minutes. I'm just repositioning.
Cool. I'm going to
be listening.
Great. I feel I'm going to check in as well with this. How I'm showing up right now is just at the end of the most amazing, intense gathering with 20 self-management practitioners from around the world in upstate New York at this beautiful retreat zone, and we just went down to like a super deep level through this 4 days, and I'm refreshed with this deep like clearness on self-management being really needing a lot of ego work constantly. And that's so important, and not just ego work, but all of the parts of personal development, even bordering sometimes on the spiritual. And it's just like super strong in me right now, just from this crazy weekend I've shared with these amazing practitioners. So I'm showing up with reconfirmed commitment and clarity for this, and a commitment to be really present with you all for this 5 weeks. Thank you. Who's popping next?
I will pop next. Thank you for sharing that, actually, Kate. I think, I'm sorry everyone, I'm kind of showing up a little bit haphazard because I've just had some work thrown at me just before this call, like literally 2 minutes. So that's kind of on my mind, and I'm trying to transition into this call and be really present. I think for me, the intention, it's funny, I did do all the reading and I wrote a whole section around what I was intending, and I've forgotten that booklet, so I'm just going to do this off the cuff. But I think for me, coming into an organization like Consensus, I didn't actually believe that it was possible to find a place that actually really values sort of humans and, you know, who we are from a personal perspective. And I've noticed since I've been here, I keep getting asked the question a lot, like, what are you interested in? What are you interested in? Like, we want to know what you're interested in, and then we can figure out what your plan is. And it's really hard for me because I'm coming from a very corporate structure where I just do what I'm told. And so I'm super, super stoked to be part of Consensus and the bigger vision of kind of handing people back their sovereignty and saying, no, you decide for yourself. But I think my bigger question is, like, you can hand someone back their sovereignty, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to know how to use it. So for me, there's a question around, kind of showing up, giving myself permission. And I've also been kind of observing how other people operate when there's no hierarchy in place. And so, I'd love to sort of learn more about how to kind of handle some tricky situations that I'm already beginning to see. And also kind of get people on the train of like self-awareness of like, if you're feeling triggered right now, then, you know, I kind of would invite you to sit with yourself and figure out what you're being, like what you feel triggered about. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I can go now. I'm showing up very excited. I've heard a lot about these ideas like self-organizing, and just I read through the reading this morning and reading about teal organizations, and self-awareness and then group awareness and your awareness of yourself in the group. It's something I've read a lot about in terms of ideas, but never really seen it in practice. And I'm really excited to see how I can bring these ideas into, like, embody them really. And my intention with this course is to actually do that, like actually embody these ideas and bring them back to my team so I can be a better team member and listen and hopefully be a good model to my teammates and other people in the mesh to show up better, I guess.
I can go next. So I'm showing up a little tired after Eat Berlin. I was reading in the flight back to London, and I was very impressed with the relationship about how everything started with your own self, and I found a lot of similarities with personal development and also ideas from Buddhism, and I'm very excited. I would like to learn more. I'm showing up with an open mindset, and yeah, I would like to know how I interact, to know more about me and how I interact with others, so I can have better relationships. Yeah.
I can go. So I'm showing up today very excited and passionate about self-organization, full of desire to learn and how to put it into action. Also learning about all of you today and throughout the next 5 weeks is very exciting to me. My intention is around personal growth and letting go of ways of working that are egocentric. Gaining a better understanding of all of this so that I can help our OD team or dev team improve the design for future participants.
I'm ready to pop. This is Susan. I'm showing up today super excited. It's curious to me, and when we were putting together the invitations for this cohort, it's hard and interesting to try to design a group that will be willing to actually fully participate and fully be in, but also recognizing that we're designing for a whole organization of humans that might not be quite ready to be here today. So that's one of my intentions, is to explore together how this group becomes, I guess, the touchstone for future participants, how up for that you are, what that could look like, and yeah, how this experience can be brought to the rest of the mesh in a way that feels good. Doesn't feel like a mandate. It feels like an opportunity and an invitation and a gift. Yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Who is left? Sorry, I got kicked off the internet. Lisa.
Yeah, just building on Susan's check-in. I'm showing up with, just such curiosity and excitement. Every organization is totally different, and there's no one size fits all, as Kate said. So my intention is really, how can I be of service and support you guys and consensus in the mesh? If we can help you avoid some pitfalls and provide a bit of inspiration and a bit of a safe space to try some things out, and just kind of how can we best set you guys up for success and create a good sort of first impression about self-organizing that makes you want to kind of take it and run with it and go and put it into practice. So that's kind of what I'm super excited about. So yeah, it's really fun to be part of this.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, is that everyone?
Nope. Camilla?
No.
Oh, sorry. No, Travis.
First. Camilla, did you get to go? I can go. Yeah, cool. So
You're cutting out a bit.
Can you guys hear me now? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
That better? Okay. Yeah, no, I'm just excited and I would say more urgent to learn hacks to self-organization. And
Sorry, Travis, we lost you. We're gonna keep moving, and perhaps you can write your check-in in the chat if you can hear me. Susan, was that everyone? Sorry, my little lapse means I don't have context.
So Camilla had some questions. I don't know.
For about 3 months.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Can you mute Travis? And we might just have to get in the message that he's not coming through well. And Camilla, do you have a question about the check-in?
Yeah, I just had, I guess it's more of a ask rather than a question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that what tools or tricks can we use when we are triggered by something? That can be just, and that's something that we can think about.
Great. Is that in reflection to something you heard as people checked in?
Yes, I believe. Okay. Oh, hold on. I can see her.
Okay, well, I think that's a beautiful invitation for us to actually go into the next component of the course, because that is super important. What tricks and tools, or what can you personally do when you are triggered by something? Where is it coming from? So that's actually, we're going to talk a bit about self-management, and I'm going to ask you to define the difference, please, Susan and Lisa, for a bit, from this place of that question, actually, Camilla. So before I get that definition, I want to build on that, because I have heard a lot of people, and it is super incentivizing. Oh, there's these tools and systems and processes, and once we establish them, we as an autonomous group of humans will just be able to look at the guidelines, that's a child, and procedures and make it work. And there's something, that happens in that, which are human beings are very complex, and every human relationship, especially and the one with ourselves, is also complex. And it is essential that we factor in the way we're triggered, the way that we react in certain situations, our kind of default like zero-sum behavior mode, that it happens inside and outside work, and that unless we're doing something with that, unless we have a process of introspection and a process of being able to surface and state our own needs, to set our own boundaries, to ask for what we need, to communicate in a way where we are triggering others less and we're aware of their triggers. This is all really fundamental work. And that's when that work starts to happen in groups, you start to see an amazing level of communication. And that's when you start to establish some of these core behaviors and culture. That's when these agreements, these processes, these tools are there to use. And they can be there at the same time, but it's totally, for me in my journey over the last kind of 6 years, in living and breathing this work and turning up every day with full autonomy, but also wanting to make something with a group of people. And I really strongly believe that the best work we can do is in teams, team human. The journey of the individual is valuable, and we're all on that journey, but what we can create is very strong in teams. So self-management for me is this balance of autonomy and relationships in community. And I'm going to talk a lot about my theory of doing growth in community through this training, but I'm just so passionate about the need, and through my own lived experience of figuring out, I just wade into this conversation without context, and because I'm used to communicating in this way, caused, all kinds of ripples and effects. So for me, this process of asking, truly checking in with ourselves and figuring out how we impact the group is the starting foundational level. Susan, tell me, what is self-management to you?
I just have Thomas's words ringing in my ears that it's all about language. And I think that one of the things that I feel like I've spent way too many hours and cycles of my life on is trying to figure out the right language and the right words for something that we're trying to describe. It is going to be described slightly different by every human. For example, self-management can reflect individuals with care needs being responsible for how their particular human needs are managed. Self-management in the language of an organization like Decurion, who I'm a big fan of, is around more specifically about managing reactions, managing triggers, managing how you're showing up. For me, self-management is more about how I show up to practice with others, how we are aware enough of ourselves to be able to organize our lives and our work to turn up and expect that level of relationship to reflect that through our own autonomy and our use of agency. And I think Tanya used the word sovereignty. So I'm super interested in that. In the context of, we've talked a lot about in the context of consensus. Consensus doesn't use the phrase self-management. Consensus uses the word self-organizing. And the understanding that the kind of theory, as far as I can understand it, and maybe everybody has a slightly different kind of lived experience of what it feels like, but that the idea that brilliant people coming together to create the future have enough will and agency about them to figure out how to organize. And yes, that might be true, but it, when we are thrown together to do something with all of our stories and assumptions and life experience, I think we're all showing up slightly different. And Saraswati was sharing the phrase tyranny of structurelessness, that in the absence of actual structures or scaffolds, the emergence of these natural structures that we are not even noticing show up. And it could be in the form of hierarchy or shadow hierarchy or power dynamics across all different levels of the way that power dimensions are expressed. You showing up and expressing your power from the position of context or authority or influence or age or whatever those things might be. If we can start recognizing and being aware in ourselves how we're expressing both our autonomy, agency, relatedness, and power, then I think that we can be really open to creating these organizing dynamics that are unique to every set of humans that we interact with. Back to what Kate said, there is no one way. And I think that if we really want to do this in a way that is life-giving and capacity building, we need to be brave enough to live in the ambiguity and the goo of it taking a while every single time we come together with a different group of humans to really intentionally set that conscious structure, whatever that might be. So I know that I can be a little meta when I talk sometimes, but hopefully those strands of words made a little bit of sense. And I'd love to hear from you, Lisa, because, you know, I'm such a, I think that the perspective that you've had just by doing the work that you do with so many organizations and being so curious about self-organizing and self-management in, you know, 20 or 30 or 40 orgs around the world that you've been looking at, what you see that difference as, or if it's all kind of the same goo, I'm just waiting to emerge.
Yeah, language is a really interesting thing, and I think, I think there's no right answer. I think distinctions that I found really helpful are kind of a distinction between self-organizing and self-managing. And we were talking before about self-management being relating to the self, and self-organizing being more to do with the team, and that there may still be some kind of leadership or formal structure. So it's not like fully sort of self-managing, but it's done in a much more democratic and transparent way. And I think a really interesting distinction that I've been interested in exploring is like some of the myths and misconceptions about self-organizing and self-management as well. One of which is that there are no leaders, there's no leadership in self-organizing companies or in self-managing companies. And actually, the organizations that I've spoken to and worked with that do self-organization really well, it's the exact opposite of that, actually, that these organizations are leader-full, I find. But there's an interesting leadership, there's an interesting piece, I think, about human skills. And this is something that our guest later on, Joshua, a term that he coined, which I really like, which is a better way, I think, of describing the term soft skills. So like, what are the human skills that we need to learn and unlearn in order to work together in a self-organizing, self-managing way? And this thing about leadership is really interesting, because I think there are two habits I've noticed that are important to learn when we think about the self in self-organization around leadership, which is whether you're a formal leader or not, how can you get authority or step into your authority? Because many of us are used to waiting, or waiting for instructions, perhaps, or maybe we're responsible, but someone above us is ultimately more accountable. So we're sort of slightly passive, waiting in the wings sometimes, and sometimes it's not even a conscious thing. It's just how we've been conditioned. So one skill of self-organization is practicing and learning how to step into authority. And if you notice something that's not working in the team or the organization, remembering that no one is going to fix it for you. There's no kind of magic team that's going to kind of be a good mom or dad and help you with that thing. It's like learning to do something about it, or bring that up in your team and say, okay guys, I've noticed this, what are we going to do about it? So getting authority is one leadership habit I think is interesting. And another leadership habit is giving away authority. So if you are a leader, whether that is you were formerly a manager, or you are a leader now, or you've just amassed a kind of organic leadership position, some kind of influence or something, and people tend to kind of put their problems onto you, or challenges onto you, and they look to you for advice or whatever, but you really want to empower people and encourage responsibility in the team, then it's like, how can you constantly be reflecting that back and like not accepting, because it's very tempting to accept that. It's nice to be needed. But how can you start to practice like, okay, no, I'm going to consciously reflect this back, kind of like beam it back to people. And so that's something I'm always really interested in when I'm looking at organizations around the world that are self-organizing. And one example that I like is a organization in Mexico called Nearsoft, which is several hundred employees. They're an IT company. And in part of their onboarding process, because they recognize that there are a lot of skills we have to learn to do self-organization well, they have like a art of feedback masterclass. And if people, they say to people, if you're going to struggle with giving feedback to your peers and colleagues, then we want you to tell us straight away, because then we'll make sure you get some support from one of our kind of self-nominated coaches in the organization, because we have a real commitment that everyone gives each other feedback. So if that's something that is new to you or you're uncomfortable with, let's know straight away. Let's be totally honest and transparent about that, and let's support you in building that capacity. So I think that's a really nice example of like straight away when people join the organization is setting that standard, that habit and norm for self-development and skills, a human skill like feedback, and how important that is.
Cool. Thank you, Lisa. And I just want to ask you and Susan, I want to state that need for myself. I actually am really struggling right now with getting some feedback on a couple of things. So I need some help, and I want to talk to you both later about that. And thanks, Susan, for bringing out in the chat some of this stuff around trigger points. And Susan and I have a beautiful working relationship where we really do try to hold each other account and ask this question: what's really behind that comment? What's really going on for you there? And it's a intense process that we walk through, but does it improve how we work and live? So we're, of course, running behind time, and it's fine. But we are going to move into a nice little exercise where you start to meet and talk to each other before Josh joins us in about 10 minutes. So Lisa, can you just briefly explain 1, 2, 4 all, and then Susan will put you into your Zoom rooms.
Yeah, sure. So 1, 2, 4 all is one of many, it was 33, but I believe there's now more, liberating structures. And liberating structures, for those who don't know, are a suite of what's called microstructures. In other words, alternatives to all of the little microstructures we use in meetings and discussions, like brainstorms or presentations or open discussions. And these are alternatives to those tools that are much more liberating, and that they involve more people in shaping the output of the activity, and also structured in that they're much more purposeful, and they have kind of deliberately designed time constraints and sort of time boxing to make the most productive as possible. So 1, 2, 4 all is one of those liberating structures. And it's a really simple one that you can use in any of your meetings or discussions. And the principle is that you spend 1 minute reflecting on a question or a topic in silence, maybe taking some notes, or reflecting just in your own thoughts. It's up to you. And then you spend 2 minutes discussing and sharing that, whatever you came up with in a pair. So 2 minutes in a 2. And then you spend 4 minutes in a group of 4. Again, just sharing what you reflected on. And through each iteration of sharing, you start to distill the essence of what it was you came up with. And it means you can rapidly cycle through involving people in something and kind of getting diverse opinions in kind of 12 minutes. And then the final step is that you come back together as a whole group, and you sort of might popcorn or cherry pick some key insights from that. So that's 1, 2, 4 all.
Cool. So for this question, it's really loose and really broad, and there's like an art for giving instructions. I think people need to be super clear on the process of what they're going into, and our kind of modus operandi is sometimes to have broad questions, because you're all very smart humans and you can sense your way into the answers that are right for you. So Lisa, can you just state the question that we're going to ask people?
Yeah. So the question for this 1, 2, 4 all is, it's kind of a sentence, really, a sentence for you to complete. If you really knew me, you would know that being at my best in a team looks like ...
Cool. So just circling back to the intention for this week, starting with the I in team. What's beneath, I need to have my coffee at 9 a.m. Let's go a level below. if you really knew me, and if you would know that me being at my best in a team looks like, and we're going to come back for a very quick feedback round before we see Josh in 12 minutes. Yeah. I'll let Susan run the process.
Yeah, so what's going to happen now is I'm gonna click a button, and then you'll be invited to join a breakout room with one other person. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, Lisa, in the room with one other person. Then at 2 minutes, you'll receive another notification to join another room where you'll be put with 2 other people. So we'll have 3 groups of 4 at that point. And I'll give you 4 minutes in your group of 4, and then we'll bring everybody back together. You shouldn't need to do anything except press a button. So Lisa, do we want to invite people for a minute of quiet reflection before we go into the rooms, or shall we just go straight into the rooms?
Yeah, I think let's do a minute of quiet reflection, and I'll let you know, or maybe Susan, you can create the rooms when the minute's up.
Gotcha.
Susan, I'm going to leave this computer because I'm on 2 computers because my Zoom's frozen. So I'll drop off on one.
Great, thanks, Josh.
Okay. 1 minute quiet reflection. Start now. Okay.
Hey, there we go. Can you hear me okay now? I moved cafes while trying.
That's good. That's good.
Cool. Okay, finally. Oh my God, I've heard every word. Just been hopping around.
Are you able to go into your room?
I am. Yes, I can go into a room now.
Yep.
Great. We can hear you loud and clear, Travis. That's fantastic.
Oh, that's good. Self-organizing around better internet. There we go.
Brian and Saraswati, can you join your rooms, please?
Do you have a little button?
I do not.
Yeah, I'm not seeing. No, I'm not seeing a button.
I thought if you could try that one more time.
Yeah, I will. Hold on just a sec.
Thank you.
I am on mobile. I don't know if that would change anything.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Perhaps.
You know what? Oh, wait a sec. Here we go. Is this it?
No, hold on just a second. I don't quite know what's happening here. Just give me a second. And Daniel's come back, so let me just deal with this. Just give me a sec. And maybe Travis and Saraswati, you can have your conversation here.
Oh, great. Yeah, no.
Oh, Tanya, hi. Daniel should be with you. What happened?
I think I just pressed the button too quickly.
No, I think you're okay. Let me just leave you and make sure that Daniel comes.
Great.
Have something already in mind? I could fire off something.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think being very self-aware. I am at my best when I am receiving praise. I think that's something I'm like I'd like to tell myself over and over again that that's not true, but I think that I don't know, I clearly have that sort of personality where I derive a lot of, I don't know, like satisfaction, and like I'm highly, highly motivated by just getting a little bit of validation, feedback. It's definitely what drives me, as much as I try to read books and teach myself to not worry so much about that. So
yeah, I respect that honesty, and also, I mean, who isn't? That's yeah,
definitely. Anything that top of mind for you though on that?
Yeah, for me, it's funny. I was sitting and thinking. I thought like I had all these thoughts, but the real clear thing was that when I'm supported, came through. Like at first, I felt like this really strong, like when I can just do what I need to do. But actually, I'm really at my best when I have a really good support structure, and where like when my instincts are being met, like by my team, and vice versa, I'm sure. But yeah, so I'm at my best.
Have you thought about what that means to be supported, or like anything more? More specific.
Yeah. So I mean, specifically, I was thinking about like, I mean, so when I get really specific, but when I'm working in user experience design, for example, and I worked in UX for a long time. I'm typically the only user experience designer on a team, but user experience design is a super multifaceted role. And like support would be like, people would be like people leading on some of these other facets. Like for example, UX design involves user research, competitor analysis, interviews, focus groups, like information architecture, like user flows, prototyping, and like visual design. And there's just all of these pieces, and it's always me like holding these things together. But sometimes someone will come in and they'll just play a support role and take on just a piece of the puzzle, and it will just make like the world just a better place. Like it really just improves my work dramatically.
I can understand that,
essentially. Yeah.
So let's move into the three of you just sharing noticings and about all of three of your answers with Camilla. If that's cool. I don't know if you both got a chance to go, Travis. I'm not.
Oh no!
And I just got the button, by the way.
Oh, okay. So maybe you're going somewhere else.
There we go. Okay.
So should we join this? Should I join this breakout room?
Yeah, Camilla, do you have one?
I'm not sure.
Okay, you should. Saraswati, can you explain to Camilla or Travis?
Oh yeah. Did sorry, are you referring to the button or just like what we're discussing right now?
Where see it?
Could one of you, and no, has anyone seen that? I have not. I actually don't have a button either. I was looking at the participants to see if I could figure it out here, but no.
Usually you just get a little button that comes up on your screen.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
I think that if you do join breakout room, it takes you there.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. So we'll explain that more clearly soon. Can you click yours?
Yes.
Great. Hey, Susan. I can't hear you. I can't.
How about now?
Yeah. So I don't think we have much time for sharing back. I'm going to get Josh to come in. So let's give them 3 more minutes and then I'll bring Josh in.
Great. Is Joshua around?
Yeah.
Okay. How are you feeling so far?
I don't know. Good, but like, they all want to just learn about processes and systems, how you teach personal development in an online training course. Whatever.
I mean, I think that, it's always a bit awkward on the first day anyway, because people aren't sure what to expect.
Yeah.
So I'm just really hopeful, although a little bit nervous about them getting their shit together and sorting out. Oh gosh, I'm recording. I'll have to cut that out.
Slow.
You're suggesting I don't speak properly.
How would you infer that from what I said? Great. Hey everyone. I hope that was interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do a reflection and share back right now. We're going to move straight into Joshua and the interview. We're going to move straight into Joshua. We're going to move straight into having a fabulous chat with Joshua Weil, who is our colleague and teammate and ex-founder of Inspiral, which some of you heard about in the sessions we did earlier in the week. Josh, just a really quick intro, and then I'm going to ask you to check in with, if you really, sorry, not that one. How are you showing up today?
So now, cool.
Yeah.
I've this week I've been hitting like a getting things done rhythm, like inbox zero, everything to Asana, scheduling my tasks, and it's such a release of my shoulders. So did that again this morning, and I'm feeling pretty excited and great.
Fantastic. Can you just say a couple of words on your background and how you came to be here with us today, Josh?
Yeah, so I'm a long-term programmer, and I've did a lot of sort of small business web development for a while, became a consultant and spent half my time consulting and the rest sort of volunteering on social issues. Around 2010, I turned my personal consulting company into a collective vehicle to help other people who want to change the world get high-paid contract work, and I've been sort of working in that Inspiral, decentralized organizing, cooperative, social impact, techie sort of space for the last 8 years.
Okay, cool. And yeah, we'll have many tales of Inspiral during this, so we don't need to get all the details now. But Josh, so we've kind of just leapt into things here in the SO101 course, and we've talked a bit, Susan, Lisa and I talked a bit about what self-management and self-organization is to us, and just trying to seed this notion of the importance of starting with ourselves in this work, kind of some ego work, and how important that is to the practice of self-management. And I'd love to just hear your take on that.
I describe it as, if you have the perfectly designed, best in the world self-management system, so the nuts and bolts and the information systems and how everything works, and you applied that to your team, then your performance is going to be limited by the capability of your individuals. So it's less about how perfect is the system you're running, and it's much more about how much empathy or communication skills or self-knowledge do the individuals in your team have. And everyone starts with different sorts of places, and everyone, I guess, values different things in terms of personal capability. So for me, the most important thing is not how good the systems are that a team is using to self-organize. What is most important is how well do those systems support the individual personal development of those team members. Because if you've got that going, if you've got people who are on a rapid maturity arc or a rapid professional development arc, and not just their technical skills, but their collaboration skills, then the team will get better over time, regardless of what systems you use. And in some way, I think the systems are kind of an excuse, and it's just much more important how collaborative the people are. And they can use different systems, fairly fluidly.
Cool, thank you. So just going back to the web development aspect, you run a program, Joshua, called Inspiral Dev Academy, which teaches people to be web developers. And an amazing part of that course is something called engineering empathy, which is kind of, in my view, like self-org 101 for developers. And I'd love to know a bit about the changes you've seen in people who come through that engineering empathy, and what manifests from that.
I think that, so we started out calling that program Engineering Empathy, and we switched it to being called Human Skills about a year ago. And so I think that reflects it a bit better. And I guess the shortest story I've got about the change I've seen in people is the idea of, I had one lady give us feedback in the graduation of our students. So he'd been in the course, her husband had been in the course for 9 weeks, and she said, "What have you done to him? He listens to me now." Like, that was her feedback and her experience of the change he'd had over those 9 weeks. So I'd probably say the biggest human skill we train is listening. And how do you deeply listen, and how do you loop back what you've heard? How do you make sure you've got clear, shared understanding? Because particularly for programming teams, it's all about having the same mental models. If there are 5 of us in a circle and we all have a different, hand on the elephant and a different idea of what we're building, it's mayhem no matter how good we are. So by having good communication and the ability to get people with the same mental model of what we're trying to do, that's actually significantly important to programmers and most people, I'd say. And that is, so there's a lot of listening training, there's mindfulness training, there is journaling, self-reflection. We talk about how to have difficult conversations with people and how to manage conflict, and giving people like a structured pattern of, okay, you want to have a difficult conversation with a colleague, here's some steps you can go through to make that easier, is just a really useful technical sort of skill. And what I've found is that most of the employers we've dealt with, they hire for culture, they hire for human skills, and they train the technical ones. And most people don't see it as possible to train the skills, but it is. You just have to do it in a certain way. So a big part of the course is very clear training, and I think there's about 7 individual modules. There's stuff about how to deal with triggers. So if someone says something and I get a disproportionate emotional response, that's an example of a trigger. And noticing when I've been triggered, what triggered me, why did it trigger me, is a really useful skill to be able to collaborate well with people. Because if someone says something and I blow up and I don't know it or why or understand, or they don't know why, it's caused problems straight away. So dealing with triggers is one. There's stuff about empathy, and empathy is fascinating. I did a lot of sort of psychology at university, and looking at how brains and humans relate to each other, and that kind of thing it's quite useful for anyone interested in teamwork, and particularly anyone interested in building inclusive cultures. Like, when you look at why humans stereotype and how they stereotype and what that does on a group, I think it's got really important lessons for anyone who cares about diversity, or particularly anyone who cares about innovation. There's really good research which is more diverse teams will innovate better, though they need to have higher collaboration skills to manage that diversity. And that's also, mental models of diversity and political spectrums, as well as gender and race and culture and professions.
Absolutely, Josh.
Keep that. That's human skills.
Yeah,
I'd say that's a rough outline of human skills, but by far and away, it's really encouraging people just to listen deeply and to understand other people. And I find one of the challenges in self-management, particularly when you've got people who are autonomous, there's a natural impulse to treat other people the way you want to be treated, which is kind of good on a moral level, but it's kind of bad on a technical level. Because say I really like clear instructions, and I assume you really like clear instructions, that might just really irritate you. So what I actually have to do is learn how you like to receive information and provide it to you in that way. And all my teammates will be different. So there's something about learning the differences of each individual and adapting my behavior to those differences, as well as having some moral basis of, fairness and kind of equality.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, like, you've kind of circled in on this dance that we're doing when we work with ourselves and then we work with others. And I would like to +1 and just maybe, contest the last part of what you said. Is I totally agree that it's kind of changing or moderating your behavior as you start to really understand and have empathy for the needs of your teams. But it's something I've been like really trying to hold strong in, is like, what are my boundaries and my needs, and how can they also see and reflect that? And I think it's an ongoing complex thing that there is no clear answer to. But I want to ask you a question around going further into that dance between autonomy. So self-management, as I see it, is not total freedom to do as we please, but autonomy is a big part of it. And can you just tell me a bit more about what you've seen and noticed about this balance between freedom and containers and boundaries, and why this is really important?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a really big difference between when someone's acting autonomously, but they are paying attention to the whole, versus someone who's acting autonomously and not even noticing what's happening, not noticing the consequences of their autonomy. And so I kind of think of it as conscious autonomy. Like, okay, I'm making a choice to do this, what impact does that have on my colleagues? What impact does that have on the culture? What impact does that have on people who are far away in the organization but are just noticing what I'm doing? Because when you think about leadership in a decentralized organization, so much of it's modeling. So much of it is just acting and behaving in a certain way publicly and encouraging other people, hey, you might want to act similarly. And I think that if you're a very staunch autonomous position, but you don't pay attention to that, then it can be quite harmful to the organization. And you can have lots of people tugging in different ways, and it can cause pain. Whereas when you've got people who are like, actually, I'm listening to the group, I understand what people are doing, and I'm going to make a very clear decision to go left when everyone's going right, that can be an act of significant leadership as well as an expression of autonomy. So for me, the balance is about noticing the whole. And I think this sort of ties into when I think about and talk to people and train leadership sort of things, it is the idea of how much attention do you have on yourself right now? How much are you thinking about your experience, your motivations? How much attention do you have on the group? How much noticing are you doing about, oh, what's Susan thinking? Or what's Kate thinking? Or why are they doing that? And how much attention do you have on the whole group? So the idea of yourself, other individuals, and the whole group, like what's the tone of this conversation? Are people dominating the conversation? Like, is it open? Are we contracted? Are we expanded? Are we in a diverging phase or a converging phase? That awareness is kind of the heart of what leadership, but also what participation in a high-functioning, self-managing organization feels like to me. And so when I think about autonomy, like autonomy with that consciousness is amazing, and autonomy without that consciousness can be quite challenging.
Whew. There's a lot to unpack there. And in week 4, we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about facilitative leadership, communication, and how we can really start to implement some of these practices. And Josh, at the end, just before I pass, so right now I'm asking questions. I'm going to ask one more, and then I invite a couple of you to ask any questions you may have for Josh. But perhaps also, Josh, just thinking about, and Lisa and Susan as well, how we direct this amazing flow of information into some of the small micro practices or tools that people can start to play with. Because as I listen, I'm, as always, inspired by Joshua, and then it's like it is at this beautiful meta level, and I really appreciated how you dropped some of those micro tools and interventions there. So I'm just wanting us to really capture and bring that forward as well. So just I'm asking one more question, and then I'm going to open it up for 15 minutes, and then we will keep moving on. So my last question is around leadership and self-management, which I mean, I think Lisa touched on it before, and I know from my work with organizations and individuals starting this practice or involved in the practice of self-organization, there's this whole, I don't know, brain explosion that often happens around leadership. And if I show up in a group and I want to go right and they'll want to go left, do we have to just come into the middle and potentially not go anywhere exciting because we're not actually doing self-organization? Or if someone says, I want to go here. And I think this is so essential for us as a cohort to really dig into. How does leadership manifest in a self-organizing company? What are the different modes? Josh, I'd love some insight and comment from your experience as someone who founded an amazing network of entrepreneurs, self-organizing, and then ex-founded himself.
So when I think about leadership in this space, I'm not sure how different it is between good leadership in hierarchical organizations. The more I'm doing this work, the more respect I have for people in regular management theory. And when they talk about leadership and teamwork and so on, I feel like I'm getting closer to where they are than further away. And I feel like it's the middle ground where there's a deep misalignment in a way. But I'd say that fundamentally, if you want to lead in this way, I'd study facilitation. And I think there's something about the art of inviting people to a game or a constraint. And it's like, hey, everyone, what do you think about doing this thing? And if they don't understand what this thing is, then it's a difficult conversation. So often you need to explain it and in a way which people can understand quickly, but also in a way where it makes sense that, yeah, I do want to play that game. So I think one of it is around facilitation and invitation. I think another aspect of leadership is really around, a lot of us have an experience of what leadership looks like when there's some kind of coercive power involved, It's like eat your dinner, or you know, that kind of thing, like what parents look like with children, what it looks like in schools, what it looks like in sort of hierarchical organizations, where it's kind of like the highest paid person or the person with the most senior title, their words carry a lot of implicit weight, which is a little bit underpinned by force or coercion. It's like, at the end of the day, if you don't eat your vegetables, me as a big human are going to pick you up and put you somewhere. Like, I can physically move you around. And if you look at the way power exists in like a more political level, like the violence underlying the state, I think it's a similar sort of pattern, which is that leadership and authority are underpinned by force. And so at the end of the day, if you don't do what your boss says, they'll fire you and you lose your livelihood, and they have that power and you don't. And I think that asymmetry is where a lot of unconscious patterns happen in leadership. And if you just say, how can you organize where you don't have the power of force? If you don't have the power to fire someone, or if you don't have the power to exert your will over them against themselves, then what does that look like? Because I find that power manifests itself in organizations with lighter structures in different ways, but it can still exert itself. So if you have lots of reputation and everyone likes you and everyone listens to you, then you have more power than other people. And if you start to say, actually, I think what you're doing is wrong, and you call someone out, that's an act of force. And it's a social force, it's a relational force, but it's still force. So the question that I find I keep coming back to in this is, how do I organize with consent, with other people's consent? How do I organize with invitations and inspiration? So it's about getting people excited and going, that just sounds so awesome. There's a phrase around, if you want to teach people how to build ships, don't teach them shipbuilding. Help them fall in love with the sea. They'll figure out the rest. And so when I think about training programmers, or I think about education, that's particularly true. But I think when it's about working with a team, it's fundamentally about getting everyone to fall in love with the mission of that team. Like, why is what we're doing so important, so exciting, that I'm just going to devote a ridiculous amount of hours to it and spend all these time with people because I've fallen in love with the purpose? And so I think there's something about that for leadership, which is about helping people fall in love with the reason why you're there. I think there's another part of it, which is around designing lots of little games. Hey, everyone, we're going to play a game. I'm going to call it Somebody Should, or whatever. That's a game I played a while ago. I can talk about it if you want. But it's like designing little interventions or little games or little processes which have the act of putting constraints around information or things. Like, if you think about a game, it's all about constraining possibility space. But you constrain it enough, and then you give people autonomy in the middle of that game, and then magic can happen. With no constraints, if you just say, hey, everyone, just figure it out, just self-organize, then often it's not as effective. So in falling in love with a purpose, designing games, and the rest of it, I would say, is about modeling and actively living the culture, or living a way of being, and just saying, that's how I'm showing up in the world. You can show up how you want. And I find that when you're leading, that will naturally cause an impact on the culture. So that'll be the sort of three things. But definitely studying the world of facilitators is a good in.
Totally. And as we go through this course, you're going to be learning facilitation by osmosis, which is how many of us learn. So look forward to that. And also a big part of learning to facilitate is learning how to be facilitated. So learning the cues and, what's behind the thing that the facilitator is asking, it's all part of the process, and that's going to be fun. And I'd like to add one thing to what Joshua said. Fall in love with the mission and fall in love with the humans as well. And I don't mean that lightly. And I'm going to hold it. Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Two ideas came up as you were talking.
Please.
One is, I think it was a quote attributed to Mother Teresa on leadership, which was basically, know your people, love your people, serve your people, is another really good rule of thumb. And I lost the second thought.
It's okay. And I'm going to open up for questions. And
I remember the second thought.
Please.
Sorry. I think that it's essentially, when people talk about leadership, you'll study leadership a whole lot. You probably won't study followership that much, but I think it's a topic worthy of an equal amount of consideration. Just as people learn how to speak really well, but there's less training on listening. And I think both of them are just as useful. And, most of the time you spend more time listening than you do speaking in any group environment. And that's so it's kind of, there's a case to be made that leadership and followership, we should spend more time studying than leadership and speaking.
Great, thank you. So does anyone have a question that they would like to put forward to Josh? We've got time for a couple, I think. 8 minutes worth. Anything, whatever. I think he can handle it.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I'll jump in. So I really like that sort of three, I guess, 4 levels or 4 pieces of advice on leadership. The second one about games. When you say games, what do you mean? Or do you have an example that can help illustrate that? Because that was a little bit abstract for me.
Yeah, so I found that in organizing world, you might have seen game storming, or those people who say, let's like gamify the organizational world and define things which are fun and clear constraints, which I feel is overkill. But I think often I've seen facilitators call them social processes. So if you think about open space, if you've been part of that, it's essentially a way of constraining the possibility space of saying we're going to act in a certain way and we're going to do it for a certain amount of time. And the purpose is to co-create an agenda together. And then you do your open space marketplace, and then you sort of implement it and have your sort of gathering time. And that's something I would describe as a social process or a game, which you can create new ones. I made one in Inspiral called Somebody Should, which was essentially a way of crowdsourcing what's the invisible work that needs doing, what should somebody just do, and everyone puts that up, and then you just do a dot voting listing of them all, and then you leave it. And that's just information for the whole group to say, here's the group's perspective on some work that's important. And if someone does it, someone does it. If they don't, they don't. That game worked a little bit. It didn't work in other ways, but it was something that I was looking at the community. I think Susan loved it, given those expressions. But there's something in where, as looking at the whole community, saying, I think some kind of intervention is needed. I think some kind of process or session would really help us, and that's what I mean when I talk about games.
Cool, thank you, Daniel. Does anyone else have a question for Josh? Is there?
A comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Edson.
So basically, as part of so we are working with distributed teams in Solutions London. We have a team in Kiev, another in Dublin, and another in London. We had a lot of problems because everyone was doing a lot of things and we were not aligned. So we started organizing a community of practices every Friday. So bringing developers to take decisions together. However, we had to take a decision. We were in this meeting and nobody wanted to say yes, right? So we put, okay, this is the decision, and nobody wanted to say yes. And then I asked for feedback to my boss, and he told me that I should have put more, trying to make people decide or take the decision. But I was expecting people to decide. I just wanted to, okay, what do you think? Which option? And nobody say any option. So at the end, I felt I was taking the decision, and because I didn't want to take the decision because I wanted everybody to take the decision, my boss told me that I was showing a little insecurity. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's for me, when I think about participation, I just think about people being invited to or the right to participate, but not obliged to. So in that context, I feel like if you say, hey, everyone, do you have a preference? Do you want to make a decision? If no one steps up, I think it's perfectly fine to say, yep, I'll just decide for you. And there's a sense about, because if you push out every decision to everybody, no one does any work apart from making decisions all the time. So there's this sense about how wide do you go and how narrow do you go with decisions. And I don't think there's any rules. I think it really depends on the people, on the context, on the types of decisions around how wide do you want to go, how much time do you want to spend on it, versus have a few people say, hey, everyone, I suggest we do this, and I'm going to start doing it unless I hear otherwise. So that would be, it sounds like you were sort of in the dance and learning that space between. And to me, the way to learn it, I don't know, I'm a very big trial by error kind of person. There might be a better way of sort of learning the structures, but I just say just do lots of it. Try and convene lots of decisions in groups and you'll start to get more of a sense of actually that was too wide, that was too narrow.
Yeah, just noticing on that, a lot of this trial and error, like proceed in this way, seems to rest a lot on the trust of the group. How do people start to really trust each other and know that when they try something, the team is behind them? And I noticed that, Brian, you have a question, so I'll just leave that there as a comment for us to all ponder later.
Thanks, Kate. Hopefully mine fits with the theme of decisions and decision making, but I'm kind of curious what it looks like in a team when consensus isn't emerging quickly from a smaller group who has context and is working on something, and what it looks like when there's healthy forms of escalation in a situation like that. And you have a development background, so I think it would be super cool if that was in the context of development decisions, because it would be relevant to my personal case and hopefully others.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the hardest ones of working in a consent-based sort of self-organizing system, is that over and over again I've seen the pattern of a small number of people will dive deeply and they'll start having meetings together, they'll build up a lot of context around an issue or a domain, and then they'll start to suggest decisions to everyone. And sometimes, and people who are affected by it, we value that they have the right to object or to participate, and that it would, and then they can just block it and say, actually, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I think that I've probably personally seen this more in a organizing context, like how are we going to do the agreements of Inspiral, than I have in a sort of development context in terms of the size. Like I'm very much a small project developer, and I don't really have multiple teams to deal with that often. But you can easily understand it where someone's making an architectural choice or designing an API in a certain way, and then other people have opinions on it. And so the stuff that I've learned in this way is that there was a great thought from someone in the Foundation's call last week around treating it like a design process, not a decision-making process. Because when you say decision-making, it evokes a certain kind of attitude or approach. We need to make a decision on our architecture, or we need to make a decision on XYZ, our funding, our budget. And when you do that, it's like, okay, people start to do a proposal, they'll start to take it to people object to the proposal or want changes to it. Whereas if you sort of do it as a design process, it's much more around, oh, cool, we're going to get all the design criteria from everybody right at the beginning. And they input that, and that's what drives the small team. And even having that stage will give people a lot more buy-in and a lot less objections to what you come up with. And I find that what people most want to see when other people make decisions for them, because so often it's been the case of, I object to it, we talk lots, actually I see that's a good way of doing it now. And they go through reinventing, like the whole cognitive reinventing the wheel cycle to come to the same conclusion. Whereas if you can have their input in the beginning and they can see their voice in it when you present your proposal, there's much less of that. It doesn't remove it, but it reduces it. So one thing is getting all the inputs from people at the beginning. And another one is multiple iterations of escalating sort of size and scale. And that if someone can see that this has gone through many iterations of rigorous design, one, the design will probably be better, but also there'll be less objections when it hits the outer edges of your engagement. And the third thing I'd say on this is being really clear on your boundaries, because it might be you're asking too many people's consent before just doing something, and you're actually saying, I'm going to try and get consensus from too wide a group, or people with different sorts of levels of stakeholdership, the pigs and chickens kind of idea. And so that is, so that will be the other thing I think about, is how wide is your boundary of decision making and is it appropriate?
Fantastic. Time for one more, Josh?
Yeah.
Great. We'll do maybe 4 minutes. Does anyone else have a question for Josh? Susan, I'm going to see if anyone else does first, and then I'll come to you. Okay, go ahead.
JV, I just love to hear you talk a little bit about the thing that was coming up for me when you were first talking is how do we ensure that as we're coming together as a group that we get a level of synthesis and not groupthink? What are your kind of tips around that?
One of them is probably celebrating dissensus, and the idea that's like not everything needs to have everyone agreeing on it. And if you try and have everyone agree on everything, one, you have to spend a lot of time, but two, you're going to be rigid and you're not going to be as adaptable to changing in your environment. So you'll have a fragile organization as a whole. Whereas if you have people who have quite different opinions, but they have enough passion in the mission to overcome those differences, but also they have enough mutual respect for each other, I find that the worst thing, when difference of opinions devolve into lack of respect for the other person, like that person's just wrong or they just suck, then that's not healthy. But when it's like, wow, they think completely different to me and I value that and I value them, then you have a healthy tension. So I think investing in relationships is one way to avoid groupthink. And I think the other one is also thinking about the periphery of experience and the diversity of the team. If everyone's come from a certain place of the world or they've come through certain trainings or professions, then they'll all see the world in a certain way. And something I've definitely seen in self-organizing is like a whole bunch of developers trying to treat humans like machines. Let's design an organizing system the way we would design software, and let's have people in it behave like we expect computers to behave. And that it doesn't work that well. I've also seen people with the deep sort of like activist and participation and consensus sort of backgrounds. Let's treat everyone like well-meaning individuals. Like, let's treat everyone like highly, that sort of way. And it doesn't have enough sharpness in there. Whereas when you get those two thoughts of view, worldviews together, I find you can create a very healthy tension, and that's something useful. So I'd start to think about the diversity of the individuals in the group. And the other one would be their exposure to outside influences. Having people who regularly spend a lot of time in other contexts is a way of keeping that diversity, because people will tend to, collapse like under gravity.
Thank you. Just to conclude, I'd love to circle us back again to the theme of the week, which is that really hard work of starting with the self and the unpacking, unwinding of the ego, so that we can turn up and really be open to collaborate and trust others. Josh, can I invite you to share, and this is a bit on the spot moment, a time in your journey where you had to do this type of thing? Figure out a trigger, unwind a bit.
I can think of several. Probably the most recent would be my journey through Inspiral. It was my personal company. Over the first 2 years, I invited every single person to it, and I never wanted to be like the founder I just wanted a bunch of peers. So then for the next 6 years, I spent my time slowly extricating myself from a disproportionate amount of influence in the network. And so that's when you do something like that, your individuality, your identity, or my identity, got really coupled with Inspiral's. So if someone says Inspiral sucks, I just hear you suck. And it triggers me to say, no, Inspiral doesn't suck, or that kind of thing. And so it became hard to see criticism of the network as valid and hard to accept it. So creating a difference between me as Joshua and Inspiral as a thing was one part of that journey. And then I think there was the final part of it was probably about a year and a half ago, where I started to sort of, because I was fairly protective of a lot of Inspiral's core missions, like how passionate are we about self-organizing, or could we just be a hierarchy, or lots of things. And I would be quite staunch on certain viewpoints. And about a year and a half ago, I made the decision of, well, hey, it's everyone else's network. I'm not going to, it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter what I think Inspiral could be or should be. I've kind of left my imprint. Now I'm going to let other people make it whatever they want, even if I hate what they make. And that kind of, and I guess that was the sort of winding up of the journey for me. But it took a lot of, it wasn't obvious when, as I was going through it, that I was responding from a personal ego point of view in different contexts. I was just reacting. I was just doing what I thought best. But as I had more space and more reflection, I started to realize, actually, maybe my voice is unhealthy at this stage. And so I guess I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. We better get moving through a few little instructions, but just want to extend really heartfelt gratitude towards you, Joshua, for all that you've done and continue to do, and for joining us today on the call.
No, my pleasure. And it's, I've been a long-term programmer. I absolutely love programming. Some of my happiest time is when I sit down and get to write code and kind of things like that. But I found that the reward I get from working with others and building organizations, there's something different, something richer. And so I think it's a pretty exciting path to be on, this whole learning how to work without control over others and to work with consent. And it's just, there's a richness here, which I think actually, if we can solve it at a small level, it could have quite transformative effects on society as a whole. So I think in some ways, this is some of the most important work that anyone can be doing.
Thank you. See you soon.
Hey, everyone.
Okay. So we have 13 minutes left. We don't have time to reflect on that, and I think maybe many of the messages that he's brought across might, they'll come out in other ways, and as we work through this 5 weeks. But for now, it's really important for us to think about how we create and build together. And so I'm going to talk very quickly about the assignments, and then we're going to put you into your team groups for the first week for 5 brief minutes to think about how you will organize. I'll let Susan talk to that. So you're in the reading, there's 3 individual assignments that we're going to ask you to do. We're not going to look at these or talk about them necessarily. This is just a really important part of your personal kind of journaling. And we've really thought about how some of these things might help you us start the journey together. So there's the personal values assessment. So share it with your teammates. That would be the invitation. Create a 1-page profile using a template from another self-organizing company. And also do a 5 whys assessment. And this can just be relatively quick and simple, just in your journal or wherever you take notes. Do a 5 whys assessment. The group assignment, I'll leave you to go into that as you jump into the rooms. You won't have much time, but there's just basically we want you to go look at what else is out there in the world, and create a profile of a self-organizing company, looking at some of the questions that we're asking you. And we've provided a list of some that you could profile, but also feel free to bring something else in as well. So it might seem like there's a lot of instructions and not much time to discuss them, but unless there's any, once you start reading them, really big questions, we're just going to ask you to jump into the groups now to meet your teammates and find a time where you can meet to start the work. Is that okay? Okay.
Great.
Susan.
And I just want to reinforce that hopefully it'll start to occur to you that the way that we've created and designed this experience is for you to be actually experiencing the doing whilst you're learning. And one of the most important things about this is really committing to each other to get the work done in between the Monday and the Friday. Know that everybody's busy, but that's why we've been really explicit that this is an 8-hour-a-week commitment. And so you're going to need to figure out how you're going to meet together, whose Zoom room you're going to use, where you're going to do your work, how you're going to organize, and how you're going to come back on the Friday and share what you've learned so far. So again, I just really wanted to emphasize that. As Kate said, every week you'll be with a different team, but the teams this week, I'm going to put you into the room. Just to say that Saraswati, Travis, and Tanya's team also includes Malky, who it's going to be up to the 3 of you to bring her into the process. She'll be on board from tomorrow morning, so that needs to happen. Kate, I saw you raise your hand before we go away into rooms.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize this is MVP, rough and ready, push it up. Like, we are creating a community of trust here, so we don't need to see beautiful, polished work. We just want to work with. So yeah, to answer your question, Mary, you will be presenting back what you've done on Friday, and we'll be doing a collective sense-making session just for an hour, like fast-paced, like jumping into it on Friday, and it's fun, hopefully. So Susan, into the rooms for 6 minutes, and then we're going to do one of my favorite ultra fast-paced checkouts. See you soon. And we can circle back on that. We're gonna, sorry, did you have something to say, Brian?
Yeah, I caught the tail end of that. So that's dangerous. So because I'm going to be tons of assumption coming in this, but I'm wondering if Daniel's kind of wondering if there's like a sample report that somebody else has done or something. Yeah, I thought so, Susan. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify because that's the sense I got from Daniel's question was that is this promoting ambiguity and heterogeneity with intention? And I saw Susan nod, and I'm going to now make that assumption. Does that help, Daniel, or make it worse? Did we lose you?
Oh, that's great. We've lost my video, but I heard that, so thank you.
Great. Okay, we're in flow, team. We've got 3 minutes to check out, and I'm going to ask you a question. We might go 1 minute over. And the checkout question is, what is your spirit animal? Yeah, that's right. What is your spirit animal? And I'll start. Mine is the gray wolf. I don't know why gray, but kind of like loves independence, loves like running out, but also really needs to come home to the pack. Who's next? I'm going to call it in and nominate. Can we go to Susan?
A duck, Canada goose, some kind of big ducky type of bird. Brian.
I've been given fox or chameleon. Today I'll go with chameleon, and just for the excitement and comfort of adapting to new environments.
And call in the next person, please. Okay, it's Camilla. And then ask the person next. Okay, you're eating. Mary.
Oh, sorry. I was typing. Oh, yeah. So, dog for me. Really loyal, friendly. I like to be.
Fantastic. Edson.
Do I need to pick an animal?
Yes, you do.
A cheetah.
Great, and you can give analysis on your choice or not.
I like to be very fast and, I don't know, agile.
Fast and agile. Samantha.
Probably a whale. I don't know. I love whales and marine biology.
Beautiful. Tanya.
I will say a dove, just because the last time I did a visualization exercise around this, it was a dove about promoting peace and harmony amongst groups of people.
Very nice. Josh.
So I actually took a quiz about this 2 days ago, and I got my spirit vegetable is a cabbage, because I have many layers and I'm very versatile.
Yeah, he's forked the checkout exercise, but we're going to take it back to animals. Travis.
Yeah, I was going to say a dog. Probably a retriever, because that's what I have. And for all the reasons Mary said. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Saraswati.
A tiger, because I'm in India and they're around and I can't wait to see one, and I'd love to be one.
Powerful. Thank you. Daniel.
I guess the easy answer is a Pegasus, just because that's the team I'm on. But I'd probably go for a dolphin. I was going to say dog, but I was finding and looking for another playful animal that gets to roam free and explore a bunch of space. Yeah, dolphin.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Looking forward to roaming free, exploring space and being playful. Lisa.
I'm going to say meerkat, because I love that they do this and they're social creatures and it's fun and playful.
Beautiful. Thomas.
I actually really resonate with the wolf, but I think it's a different animal. But it's more the metaphor that you gave after that, is it? And that's what I've been seeing in consensus, that it's really important to make a break, but then it's also really important to come back with your team or be pulled back in by your team, and reform, and then it's kind of like a rugby player, makes a break in a back line, and then his forwards come up and power him, reform again. So maybe a human rugby player.
Human rugby player. Great. Okay, Tanya, we're losing people. Sorry for going over. See you later, Tanya. And Susan, we haven't... Did we do you? We did. Did we... Okay, we're just going to leave. Thanks, everyone. Camilla, you didn't say. I remember.
Oh, yeah. I think mine would be owl.
Perfect. Wise owl. Okay, everyone, we'll work it out together. Thank you for joining us. Jump into Slack. Susan's freaking out. What do you got?
Our movement, our leaving movement.
Oh my God. Okay, we're going to get weird. So every time we leave a call, we're going to do a movement that we all do together. And we've already got a suggestion from Sam. How are we moving with this? Like this? Oh my God. We've got, and a clap. Great. Okay, team movement for every time we end the call. Done. The synchronous clap. We're going to get better at it. Thanks so much, everyone. Looking forward. This is going to be great. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your participation.
Bye.
Okay, I gotta go get myself out of upstate New York, back to New York.
Okay. See you later, lovelies.
Cool. Let's debrief as like async in the Telegram if it's helpful.
Okay.
On the fly.
Cool.
Thanks.
See ya.
That was
Bye.
fun.
Bye.
Bye.